Well, then we can get started. Well, thank you so much for everybody who's joining us today at this webinar. We're really glad to have you here on this topic of EU Pay Transparency. And yeah, thank you for taking the time for your time and your attention on this. We've prepared this panel of 3 experts to give you all the possible insights that we can. So let me introduce our speakers to you. We have Luciano from Italy. He is a senior associate lawyer at Orrick, Harrington and Sutcliffe. Then we have Veronica she's the head of organization and strategy. She sits here in Spain, and she's part of Pitch Consulting HR Solutions. And our last speaker is Michael. He is a senior managing director at Michael Page and Page Contracting in Germany and Austria. They will all dive into the topic on their own specialty. So Luciano will introduce the law to us. Veronica will talk about HR insights, and Michael will talk about recruitment. So yeah, in the next 60 minutes, we are hoping to be able to answer some of these key questions for you. So what is the new EU Pay Transparency Directive about, and how does it apply to your business? How can you prepare internally to meet the directive's requirements? What roles do HR management play in implementing pay transparency? How will the directive change recruitment? And how can you stay competitive in the recruitment market and attract the best talent? And with that, I will already give the mic over to our first speaker, Luciano.
Oh, thank you, Eileen. Welcome everyone to this webinar. As Eileen mentioned, I am an employment lawyer. I am qualified in Italy and specializing in employment law. I work in the Milan office of an international law firm, so today I'm going to bore you by talking about the legal aspect relating to the directive. I will also explain how to ensure legal compliance and touch upon what could happen in case a company should fail to comply. I can already anticipate that the directive will have such a significant impact on the way we are used to understanding employment relationship that it has been described as a Copernican revolution in our legal system, and I truly believe in this definition. So let's get right into it. As most of you probably know, the aim of the new EU Pay Transparency is to enforce the principle of equal pay for equal work, or for work of equal value between men and women. But you may ask to me, what does it mean exactly, this definition? And it means that if an employee is assigned to a particular role corresponding to a specific grade category, we would expect another employee assigned to the same or an equivalent role to receive a similar level of pay, unless there are any objective reasons that justify a discrepancy and not a discrimination between the two. In this case, it might be really important to note that pay transparency does not only refer to salary transparency, but includes salary as well as benefits. So companies will have to consider the entire, let's say, salary compensation packages, so including variable compensation, fringe benefits, etc. The law introduced new binding transparency obligations both before hiring, such as including salary range in job postings, and during employment, such as regular reporting obligation on gender pay gaps. In other words, the directive applies to companies from the pre-recruitment, pre-hiring phase, and continues to affect them throughout the entire employment relationship. Sorry for moving my hand now, I am too Italian. We will talk about some of these obligations in more detail later on. This law will affect the employees in the EU, public and private, but it won't be applicable to companies equally. Distinction for obligation are made based on the size of the company, in few words and in general. Large companies will have to create structured gender pay gap reports with higher frequency, as well as ensure transparency in recruitment and pay practices, while small and medium-sized companies mainly need to comply with the transparency requirements in recruitment and compensation management. In terms of timeline, the directive has actually already entered into force in June 2023. However, member states have time to transpose it into national law by 7 June 2026, and the first reporting obligation will apply from 2027 onwards. As mentioned before, depending on the company size. In particular, companies with more than 250 employees will have to create annual reports on gender pay gaps. Companies with 100 up to 249 employees will have to do the same, but only once every 3 years. And companies with less than 100 employees have no obligation as of today to report, but are still subject to transparency rules and workers' right to information. That said, the directive allows member states to extend this obligation to companies with fewer than 100 employees. If implemented in this way, the impact would be significantly, especially in countries like Italy, Greece, Spain, where small and medium-sized enterprises dominate the economic landscape. So we'll see what will happen. That being said, what exactly must be reported? Each company will be required to provide adequate information on gender pay gap, taking into account both fixed and variable components of the remuneration. This includes, for example, indicating the percentage of women and men employees who receive variable compensation or complementary compensation, such as commission, as well as existing pay gap between the two. Such information must be communicated to the labor inspector authorities, as well as to employees and also to trade unions, for example. I will stress again this obligation in a few minutes. So in order to prevent you adhering to the law to not be compliant, we first have to know what the law considers as non-compliance, and it is not easy to understand. Therefore, to be compliant with the law, companies will need to prepare this report. It is not prepared, or if it is prepared not in a timely way, your company will not be compliant with the EU directive. This is not the only one obligation. There are several other ways in which companies could be not compliant with the law. The first case is the one mentioned above. Secondly, as so fairly obvious enough, is failing to inform candidates in their recruitment process about the salary ranges either through the job post or in a different way before the interview starts. And additionally, during the interview, companies are not anymore allowed to ask about the candidate's salary history anymore. Both of these practices are aimed to reduce pay inequities based on negotiation power and previous work history, of course. Now we are going to the less obvious cases of non-compliance, and maybe the most interesting. Many people don't know that with the introduction of this new directive, companies now also have the obligation to periodically inform their employees about their rights regarding pay transparency. As of June 7, 2026, you will be expected to notify your employees on their rights through sufficiently clear channels, meaning this information has to be accessible to them and needs to be shared with them in a direct manner. To make some example, employees could be informed via newsletter explaining their rights and the type of information they can get, or via section in the payslip portal, for example. This obligation is far from minor, according to me, since companies will need to be prepared to provide timely, clear, and transparent response, and to handle potential multiple requests within a short time frame. For this reason, it is crucial for employers to start preparing now by ensuring that their data, internal procedures, policies, and communication process are fully aligned with the upcoming transparency requirements and obligation. Last but not least, and this might be the most important compliance point, or the most boring one, ignoring a pay gap that is bigger than 5% and that cannot be explained by objective criteria, like for example seniority, may expose the company to serious consequences. In particular, the directives provide that when pay differences between women and men exceed 5%, and no objective reason can justify such a discrepancy, consultation must be initiated between the employer and the works representatives. The goal of this consultation is to identify, correct, and prevent pay inequalities, so discrimination. During this process, the employer will be required to disclose several extensive information to the trade unions or to the employee representatives, including, for example, the percentage of women and men workers assigned to each category, middle manager, executive, so on, the average pay levels for each position, details on who received variable pay or benefits, the reason for any existing pay differences, and information on who has benefited from pay increases during the period under review, so during the last year, for example. Information that can be requested also by employees who have the right to receive an answer within 2 months after the request. Not responding or providing incomplete data violates the directives. Additionally, if the employee finds that they are paid less than other employees with the same duties, the company is obliged to give an answer to the employee by proving why he or she is paid less. In this case, if the answer is not sufficiently objective, meaning, for example, it is not based on a really ground reason, the company may be sentenced and the employee may ask for salary adjustments as well as to receive monetary compensation for the damages suffered. This can also cause a lot of reputational damage for the company, of course. Therefore, it is very important for companies to be sufficiently prepared from now. Veronica will talk more about what to pay attention to in order to, for your company to be compliant with the law. So I will hand over to her in a few minutes. Now that we know what is considered non-compliance, it might also be good to understand the consequence of it, so the consequence to not be compliant. The most obvious consequence would be the fines the company can receive when non-compliant with the new law. At this point, we don't know yet how high the fine will be, as it will probably be up to local jurisdiction to determine and will differ from case to case. So let's see what will happen. And in hand with the fines, of course, comes the possibility of legal action against the company as well from the employees. Companies that are found guilty of non-compliance will be obliged to pay compensation to the affected workers for both material and non-material damages. You might ask yourself how this prosecution process could look like as well. Well, in general, if a case of pay discrimination has been found, employees, trade unions, and other equality bodies can bring claim before national courts. These courts, so the tribunal, will evaluate each case and decide whether or not a plausible case of pay discrimination is present. In case of affirmative response, the burden of proof shifts to the employer, meaning that the company will have to prove that pay discrimination is not present, because the pay difference is based on objective criteria, like seniority, the experience of the employee, and so on. If pay discrimination cannot be disproven, employers will have to bear the consequences listed above. Moreover, the directive established that if claim is well-founded, the claimant, so the employee, will not be required to bear the legal cost of the proceedings. So it is therefore essential that businesses, companies take proactive steps now to ensure compliance beforehand. Next slide, please. Veronica will dive more deeply into what companies can do concretely to prepare for the directive, but I would like to already give you an overview of the things that require attention on this matter and that you can already start looking into now to be prepared by the time of the rollout. The first thing is to carry out a due diligence on your pay policies and salary bands. It is the advice that I give to my clients, and I think that it is the most important as of today, since the directives have not been implemented yet. And the aim is to identify any inconsistency or misalignments and understand where corrective action may be needed. Secondly, ensure that you have set up a sound and objective job evaluation system. Most of the things that need to be done to be compliant with the directive depend on this. So you will be helped to prepare internally. Furthermore, you should already set up some type of communication channel that will be used to inform your employees about their rights. Remember that this has to happen periodically, so not just once a time. So make sure that whatever channel communication you will use, it is easy to use and access. It will also be a good idea to start introducing internal audits of your pay structures, and this go hands in hand with the first point of the job evaluation as well. I want also to stress this next point, specifically, which is the training your HR department, team leaders and recruiters on the new rules. It is not only an advice, since it is the first time that a directive, an European directive, states that companies are legally obliged to train their HR departments in order to be able to speak with people about their rights and about the salary pay gap. This can be mandatory and will put HR at the center of the company for a while. So HR will become the true focal point of the organization, playing a central role in communicating with employees, managing requests, and also ensuring alignment with the directives principles. Fail to prepare HR teams adequately could expose company to legal risk, of course, as I mentioned, reputational damages as well, and internal tension, which is why training must start early before the directive will be implemented, and it should be considered as a strategic investment rather than a more compliant step. And lastly, it is also important to know what to do if you find a pay gap above the threshold that is allowed in order to correct this. So you should conduct an internal analysis and document objective reason for all pay gaps found in order to justify it. I think it is clear by now that the law will obviously shake things up internally for all companies and the HR departments as well, managers and team leaders, who will have to navigate a whole new work environment that will either make or break the company culture. Our next speaker, Veronica, will talk about this more in detail now. So I hand it over to you, Veronica, and thanks to you all for the attention.
Thank you, Luciano, for this detailed introduction to the law. Thank you all for being here today. There's definitely a lot to take into account going forward, and it will be my pleasure to share more about how your company can start preparing internally to be ready for the directive. But before we jump into how you can prepare, let's clear up some common misconceptions first, as there is a lot going around, as you might have seen. So let's have a look at the most common myths that we keep hearing about. The first one is that employers must provide open access to all salary data across the company. This is absolutely incorrect. So what it does require is transparency around the salary ranges and average pay levels for roles of equal value. This means employees will have the right to request information on mediums and average pay for their role level. Later, I will explain how exactly a job level can be defined, but for now, all you need to know is that this means that employees are not entitled to see individual salary data or their direct colleagues' salary data, and it will also not be possible for them to ask for information on other salary ranges different than theirs, okay? For example, their managers. So the goal here is to empower employees without compromising privacy. So myth number 2 is that benefits or fringes are irrelevant to the directive and they do not need to be considered when it comes to pay transparency. This is also incorrect because, as Luciano mentioned before, they are considered a part of the overall compensation structure. And we can find two options here to pay compensation in kind. There's the option of paying it out as a benefit or as flexible remuneration. And they are both compensation in kind, but the difference is that in the case of the benefits, the company assumes the cost, while in flexible remuneration, the employees technically pays for it through their fixed salary. So in the case of pay transparency, you will need to consider them both. And the last myth I want to mention is that some people believe that the matter of pay transparency is only relevant to bigger companies and that smaller companies do not need to worry about it. So while it is true that reporting obligations only start for companies with more than 100 employees, the obligation for the EU Pay Transparency Directive are still relevant to all companies, okay? Luciana already mentioned this earlier, but just to stress this point again, all companies must oblige to the new rules regarding pay transparency. And as we have already seen, there are many rules beyond the just reporting. So this is still very much relevant to every company. And believe me, it is worth preparing now. And I was thinking you might ask why. And this is because salary changes are a marathon, but not a sprint. Okay, these changes are slow and we need to start as soon as possible. So I think by now it's clear how important it is to be prepared for the changes that are coming. And some of you may already have this in place, some others might not. If you haven't started yet, you need to start as soon as possible. And if you have, you need to make sure it's been done well. So what would be the first step? The first step would be to get the basics right. Keep your organization chart up to date and ensure all job descriptions are current and clear. Then conduct or validate your job evaluation methodology. So job evaluation is the process of analyzing and clustering roles, establishing a ranking by the importance or the value, to the company. So here we always assess the job and its characteristics, but not the person in the seat. We know the separation isn't always easy, but it's absolutely essential for this purpose. There are several methodologies in the market. I will mention some of them afterwards. But for transparency, the most precise and the one we recommend is the factor point method. Once you've mapped your organization, job evaluation let us rank the roles from lower to higher based on impact, scope of responsibility, problem-solving complexity, among other factors, depending on the methodology, of course. The crucial part here is ensuring that these factors or dimensions are, of course, the weightings, are free of gender bias. And this, just for you to know, is an issue that many approaches have struggled with in the past. So once we have that rank view, this is going to allow us to cluster roles into levels of equal or similar value. And this becomes the foundation of the job levels in our company. And you may ask, why does this matter for transparency? This matters because, as we saw in the previous slide, employees are only allowed to obtain salary information of their job level only, okay? So everything related to pay transparency rests on the correct evaluation and the correct clusterings. And as I mentioned before, there are different methodologies you can use to evaluate jobs, which can influence on how levels are created. Some of them that, of course, you might know or very well know from the market are Korn Ferry Hay, Walter Towers Watson, Global Rating System, Mercer, and Page Consulting, of course, among others. At this point, let me flag a few factors, just examples, that many methodologies downplayed or even left out for years. For example, emotional and psychosocial demands, duty of care, the real impact on people's safety, well-being, and development, and the handling of sensitive information. You will find this especially in female majority sectors like teaching, nursing, and social care. So the good news is that modern factor point methods put this on a scale properly, which leads to fairer and more gender evaluations. On the other hand, it is also crucial for the directive to look at our salary bands and salary progression criteria. So salary band design, if you haven't started yet, starts right after your job evaluation. Once the roles are ranked, compare that structure with the current pay to diagnose your internal equity. Then bring the market pay data to assess external competitiveness. And balancing these two insights with your budget lets you build precise, defensible salary bands. It is not the only way to do it, of course, but it is the one we would recommend. Then a key requirement in the new regulatory context is setting clear criteria for salary progressions. This is absolutely crucial. Start mapping every process that affects pay, let's say promotions, career plans, performance reviews, and so on. And here it is, for me, the most valuable concept of this webinar, at least from my side, that it is, the issue isn't having a perfect criteria, it is having it written and communicated, okay? How can we do it? Through a policy, through a procedure, or through a work instruction. In the case of annual pay reviews, a very practical tool is the HR increment matrix. This is something very, very easy. You can build in an Excel file. It combines two transparent criteria. On one hand, performance rating, and on the other hand, the position in the range of the person, which is also known as comparatio. So each cell returns a recommended increase with a percentage or an amount, giving two fair, well-defined levers for decision making. So here, the most important point is that you're not improvising at any time. Another way base pay might change is through a clear career path. I mentioned it a little bit before, but the criteria for promotion or career progression must be explicit and published. Careers and succession plans go hand in hand. If the rules or criteria are not clear, you won't be able to point to conversation with employees or to an inspector, a government inspector. Okay. Finally, a quick word on variable pay or bonuses. Keep it strictly separate from base salary. When objectives are met, pay through a bonus like a link to a job-specific KPIs. Try not to roll it into base pay. We still see this mistake surprisingly often in different companies. And of course, bonus and variable pay system must also be clearly defined to support pay and transparency. From eligibility, timing, KPIs, target amounts, everything. Your company can choose the design, but it must be objective, documented, and consistently applied both to prevent inequities and to stay compliant. So moving forward, another thing that companies must start doing now, so they are ready for the rollout of the directive, is preparing managers, team leaders, and the HR teams. As Luciano mentioned earlier, training HR on the new law is mandatory. But please, do it on the HR team. Your team leaders and managers will face tough questions about pay gaps, and we want them to answer efficiently and without conflict. So when our law is changing, and if your leadership and your HR team aren't ready, things can turn sour very, very quickly. Let's picture a manager saying or hearing, sorry, why am I earning less than my colleagues? Okay, that will happen more often under the new directive. Managers should be able to turn that into a constructive conversation. Acknowledge the concern, explain the company's evaluation. They should know the salary structure to explain to their teams, outline the review steps, and provide a clear next actions. I mean, this isn't entirely new, but frequency will increase and under the law, okay? So sensitizing your leaders now gives them time to prepare and turn them into allies for a smooth transition as questions start to rise across the organization. We would suggest to give them just a simple toolkit, key messages, a short frequent asked questions, an escalation path, and very good simple examples of what to do and what to not to do, okay? And lastly, but not least, you will need a clear internal communication strategy. No one lives under a rock, and we know that. Employees know the law is coming and they expect to hear from you. So in this case, try to be proactive. Early communication signals commitment to fair pay and builds trust. Explain what is changing, what it means for employees, and when. Okay. We know regular updates reduce gossip and tension. So start outlining how employees can or will be informed about their right to access pay information, along with the channels you will use. Let's see, maybe you will have an HR portal or manager briefings or town halls or whatever way you can choose. Okay. And of course, we should tell them about response timelines. We need to focus on clear role, consistent messages, and a feedback loop that will make the rollout calmer, faster, and far more credible. Of course, this directive won't just reshape things internally, it will also influence our hiring strategy. Michael, I leave you that you will dive with that in the next section.
Yes, thank you, Veronica, for the introduction. The new EU Pay Transparency Directive will definitely shake things up in recruitment too. As we all know, salary or compensation in general has always been one of the biggest drivers in the recruitment process. So companies will have to prepare for a major shift. But before we jump ahead, let's take a quick look at where we are right now, the current reality. We are not guessing that salaries matters. We know they do. In our latest Talent Trends survey, 77% of European workers rank salary and benefits among their top priorities when job hunting. And 65% said salary ranges are one of the most important details in a job ad. So the desire for salary transparency isn't something that comes from Brussels. It's been driven by employees themselves for a long time. From my own recruitment experience, pay negotiations have always been a key part of winning top candidates. Salary can be a competitive advantage, often the final deciding factor. So what happens now that this directive comes into effect? Let's call them the new rules and implications. But let's start with the facts first. As Luciano mentioned earlier, companies can no longer ask candidates about their current or past salaries. The goal is to break the chain of old pay inequalities, to stop basing today's offers on yesterday's salaries. Secondly, all companies, regardless of size, must now provide salary ranges for every role before the interview. It can be shown in the job ad or shared directly, but candidates must know the range up front. Naturally, this changes the negotiation game. With expectations clear from the start, there's less room to maneuver. For candidates, it's a win. More transparency, a level playing field, more bargaining power because they understand salary bands, average pay by gender, promotion criteria. But for companies and recruiters, it's trickier. Salary flexibility as a persuasion tool shrinks. Salaries for new hires must align with internal pay structures based on job evaluation analysis Veronica explained earlier. That means companies will need to review and adjust their salary structures early to stay competitive. And there's some negotiation boundaries, therefore, that will come up. Negotiations won't disappear, but you cannot pay below the published range, even if the candidate previously earned less. You can offer more, but not freely, because stepping too far outside of the range could breach the 5% pay gap rule. So the principle becomes the role determines the salary, not the candidate's history. What are the market effects here? For companies paying below industry average, this will be a real challenge. If your employer brand isn't strong enough to offset lower pay, staying competitive will be tough. And while many organizations are focused on cost control right now, this directive will force salary reviews to stay in the game. We might also see less talent mobility because if everyone's paying roughly the same, there's less motivation to switch purely for salary. People will still move for growth, culture, leadership reasons, but the big salary jump incentive may fade. So what's the foundation of the house you have built and live in? This directive isn't only about compliance, it's about strategy. Before you rethink your hiring model, make sure your foundation is solid. Align your job offers with your internal pay structures. Ensure consistency across similar roles. Avoid pay ranges that are too wide, that can look unfair and scare off top talent. And make full use of available tools. There's no excuse today. Salary reports and market guides like the ones from Michael Page give you clear market insights and use them as a benchmark for your position and compete effectively. Beyond salary, staying competitive is the key. So what if you can't match the market average? Don't panic. While pay matters, it's not the only thing that attracts top talent. What does is, for one, total benefits of the package. Start with your benefits: flexibility, hybrid work, healthcare, learning opportunities. They all matter. Candidates look at the whole package, not just the number on the contract. Then second, transparency builds trust. Transparency itself is a competitive advantage. Most job seekers actually avoid companies that hide salaries. When you're open about pay, you attract better aligned candidates and you save both sides a lot of time. Third, employer branding and culture. Beyond benefits and transparency, your real differentiator is employer branding. Ask yourself, do we truly understand our unique selling points towards our employees? Can we communicate them clearly and authentically? Many companies have catchy slogans that put something on their wall, but what matters are the actions behind them. Culture, leadership, authenticity, these are your magnets. In our survey, 66% of European workers rank company culture as one of the top reasons for joining or staying with an employer, right after pay. Fourth, keep investing in HR. Even in tough markets, when hiring slows and budgets tighten, don't cut back on HR or branding. Attrition always happens, and unfilled roles create stress on the whole organization. Employer branding is not a luxury, it's a strategic survival. Fifth, leadership quality. One more thing. A great team leader can make or break the recruitment process. People don't just leave companies, they leave managers. So investing in your team leaders may be the smartest move you can make. Sixth, speed of process. Let's talk about speed. The faster your process, the higher your chances of securing top talent. If you move slowly, you lose candidates, even if your offer is perfect. Review your process. How fast do you respond to applicants? How quickly do my line managers make time for interviews? Do you have too many rounds? How well do your managers sell the company? Are they actually even able to sell the company? Streamline wherever possible. Speed wins. Obviously working with recruiters always does as well, because this is where we can help you. We can sell your company personally to top talent, activate your networks quickly, and simplify your hiring process. In other words, we make your job easier, but ultimately, with the little advertisement that I had to do, it's still your company's reputation and delivery that counts. And to close my speech today, the Pay Transparency Directive is not just a legal update, it's a cultural shift. It will redefine how we attract, value, and retain talent. So my final message is simple. Understand the higher cultural meaning of your company, and if you don't have one, you need to do everything to create one ASAP. And now I can hand over, Eileen, to you and the Q&A session.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mike. Yeah, as you mentioned, we're gonna hop right into the Q&A, and I can see already some questions here. Let me just maybe go point by point. I'll try to give a mix of questions since each of you has their own specialty. So maybe we can start with Luciano. Is that good for you?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Thank you, Elena.
amazing. Thank you. First question was regarding our company size. If we are a multinational company with different entities across different countries, what reporting threshold should we consider?
You should consider only the entities in Italy or in Spain or in Greece, not the old group, since the directives make reference to the company related to the nation where the company is based. So it is really simple to understand. Maybe what would be more difficult would be to understand if you have to count, for example, fixed employees too, and how the fixed employees will be counted, or also the part-time employees, how these employees will be counted for the threshold. But with respect to the countries, it is really simple. You have only to consider the employees hired in a specific country, so it will be easy.
Okay, thank you so much.
Welcome.
I'll go to Veronica now. We had another question here regarding HR. Is defining career and succession plans mandatory as per the new directive? And do you recommend defining career plans per role or per employee?
Well, no, actually the EU Pay Transparency rules do not mandate career or succession plans, but they do require a clear criteria, a gender-neutral criteria for progression. So a career or succession plans framework help us through tools that we already know to define these criteria. And the last point of this question, I think, is very, very important because it must be designed by roles. Okay, as I said before, we should not think of people, of individuals, because this might evidence not a consistent process, and we should prove that we have not been regarded by bias. Okay, so let's just do it by rules, and we will be more consistent, and we will avoid bias.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank
Let me go over to Mike. Mike, you spoke about employer branding as well. Could you maybe, one of the questions is if you could elaborate on how we can use employer branding to stay attractive, and what specific employer branding actions would you recommend to position a company as attractive?
Yeah. I think the first step is to identify your employer identity. You know, if I woke you up or someone in your company at 5 o'clock in the morning and asked, why should someone work here? They should have a clear and confident answer. You know, once that is defined, communication becomes very clear. So use authentic employee stories, show what your culture looks like in real life, not just on a career page. Train your leaders to speak consistently about your values. You know, employer branding isn't just slogans. I said that earlier. It's about actions that build trust, and that trust, you know, in a transparent world, will be truly your win and the win over your talent. But again, I think the most important thing in my eyes is to understand what is your culture, how do you identify it, and you know, what's the higher meaning of your company, what's the product, why are people joining you besides the salary. And if everybody in your company becomes aware of that, it's already a big win in my eyes.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I'll circle back to you, Luciano. Another legal question. The question is the directive only focused on gender pay gaps within similar roles, or in general for every potential salary gap within the same role, no matter of the gender?
Oh, it is a really interesting question. The directive makes reference only to gender, so it is focused on gender inequalities. But I think that maybe each state will consider also other kind of discrimination. For example, today I received a question from a client relating to the trans people, since they are not considering the directive. And it is really strange, since the directive wants to eliminate any kind of discrimination relating to salary. So maybe speaking only about women and men is not totally correct, and also not taking into consideration discrimination that may arise with respect to different role, but related, for example, to two different men, can be quite difficult to understand and to handle. So to give a really brief answer, the directive make reference only to gender, but let's see what the country will do, and in which way the directive will be implemented. And thanks for the questions, it's really interesting.
Thank you for answering. Amazing, thank you. Veronica, another question for you. This is a potential scenario. So it says, I'm a team leader and one of my team members comes to me asking for a salary increase based on the information in one of our job ads. How can I handle this
Okay.
conversation in the best way? What if they're not applicable, like if it's not applicable to them, for example?
Okay. So in this case, I would say that the goal is to make a constructive resolution aligned to the directive and also to the internal pay framework within the company. So the first thing I would recommend is to acknowledge, like, thanks for raising this. It is reasonable to ask. Let's look how this question fits in our structure. And also, they should clarify maybe some facts, like confirm the specific role, the location, their starting range, to see if that they are not somewhere they should not be. Um, I would say that it is also very important to confirm their job level. And also, managers, as we mentioned before, should be somehow prepared to explain briefly, but we do not want them to be experts, but their salary band, what's a positioning range or a comparatio. And of course, they should be aware of the progression or salary progression criteria. Um, let's say that maybe it would be very important to keep in mind the last performance review of this person, which KPIs are under their scope. Also, we said it was also very, very important to have the job descriptions updated. We should know if they have the relevant experience or the relevant qualifications that the job description um, says somehow. And of course, this will help us to justify or not a movement within the band. And I think that in the whole process, the HR team should be there to help.
Amazing. So again, once again, objective criteria is very important, having them well defined.
Yeah, and Eileen, sorry, one thing that
Yeah,
I think
go
it is,
ahead.
and it's very, very, very important also. Try the same criteria of the directive. Try that your managers do not speak in these conversations on salary history. Try to give them like a Q&A, as I said before, what a list of to-dos and not to-dos, just to help them a little bit more, to make their life a little bit easier.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next question for Mike again. What is the size of a salary range that you would recommend in a job ad? So, for example, if we say between 30 to 40K, would that be okay, or is that too big of a gap?
Yeah, that's a pretty big gap depending on at what level you're hiring. But if you know, I think you should really look at your company, at your schemes, at your various functions, and the different levels that you have. In where does it start and where does it end, and then not so much take the average salary, but take the median salary, and then see how much spread you have. But if your salary bands, not at sea level, are spread by 30 to 40K, it would really worry me because with the transparency that is happening, that's a big gap. So you will create lots of unsatisfaction in the company if they see this huge of a gap. So I'd rather, look at the median and maybe go 5K up or 5K below. But, we've been doing this for a long time. I mean, we are a stock listed global company. So, this law is not something that is, the law is new to us, but we created salary bands and medians already a while ago. And we see that again in every position, I guess, with someone starting in a new role and someone ending, moving to the next title or the next role, there's usually a gap of between 10K. So I think I would orientate myself a little bit on this amount. Again, if it varies so much, I think you should quickly make a decision on where what type of salary band you want to create and kind of operate in this form, but it needs to be rather small.
What would you? Yeah, well, no, you already mentioned it. I was going to ask what range would you definitely what do you recommend? But more or less the 5K range, right?
Yeah, exactly. Up or decrease from the medium. So you're looking at a 10K range, I guess, and the median is in the middle of that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Amazing. Then I think we still have time maybe for one more question. Luciano, this is for you, but if any of the other two want to add to this, they can. It's a question again about the companies that are spread across Europe. So if we have the same role in different countries in Europe, which means that salaries differ, same role but different location, will this still be allowed in the future, or do we need to?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean that, of course, you cannot have the same kind of remuneration across the states. I would like suggest to do it since I am in Italy, so normally in Italy we are paid less than in other countries in Italy, in Europe. So it will be, of course, I can say, useful to employees to have the same remuneration across Europe, but according to directives, you can add a specific salary range for each country and not the same all across the countries.
Okay. Perfect. All right. I think thank you so much for all your answers. I think this is all the time we have for now. We will be sending out the presentation as well as the recording and also a little summary of everything here. So I'm hoping that we are going to answer also more questions in the summary for you. If you still have questions, you can either reach out to me or to one of the speakers. I will share also their contact information with you in a second. I did want to also take this opportunity, since we were talking about salaries, to remind you that we at PageGroup, we actually provide free salary guides per each country every year. So these are always updated and also contain information from the field. So our consultants are working with the experts in the field to find out these salary ranges in their own countries. So you can get market details, you can get averages per sector, per position. And yes, they're available on our website and also through this QR codes. And like I said, they're for free, so you can access them at any point. I'll just wait 10 seconds if you want to scan this, but like I said, you'll also get the presentation and then the link to this as well. All right. And just as a last thing that I want to say, thank you so much to Michael, Veronica, and Luciano for taking the time to be our speakers today. I think I speak for everybody when I say that it was really, really informative and really interesting. Like I learned a lot in this. I also wanted to share, obviously, like I said, your contact details. So if anybody has any questions or needs help or support with any of this, the speakers confirmed to me that you're free to reach out to them. I have their email addresses here. You can also find them on LinkedIn. Again, like I said, you will get the presentation, so you'll also have this available there for you. And yeah, that's it. Thank you so much for everybody who's joined. And well, that's all for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Have a nice day.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye bye.